New exclusive CNN reporting is offering a stark warning. FEMA is proposing nearly $1 billion in cuts to disaster preparedness and security grants. That's according to internal memos and two FEMA officials familiar with the plans. And in those memos, the agency says the cuts would create a, quote, less secure nation. So this is money that goes to communities and to first responders to help prepare for disasters and potential terror attacks. Joining me now is Juliette Kayyem. She's a CNN senior national security analyst, also the former assistant secretary at the Department of Homeland Security. So Juliette, when we look at this, the fact that we're talking about a proposed $1 billion or so in cuts here, these internal memos offering this stark warning about national security, would you agree with that?
Yes, and I should say I was also a state Homeland Security advisor, so we received these grants. And so how they worked is each state would have a variety of plans or policies that, to support law enforcement efforts, emergency management, for what we call an all hazards approach. So a state like Massachusetts would do for Boston Marathon planning or something like that. And the reason why the federal government is invested, why the federal government should give these grants, is because these are federal interests. You want the states to be as strong as possible from any harm, terror or climate. So the reduction of these grants, generally called the Homeland Security grants, is a big deal for state and local recipients. It means they won't be able to invest, and it doesn't even touch upon the dramatic changes at FEMA generally regarding their staff reductions, which will then harm states and localities who won't be able to get the disaster relief and assistance they need.
In so many of these cuts, what we're seeing, and I'm thinking even most recently of proposed cuts that were discussed in the wake of the deadly flash flooding in Texas. You and I were covering that as we were learning more in that weekend in the aftermath. There seems to be, in many cases, there's a push for a big headline, right? In terms of we're cutting a big number of employees, for example. And most Americans would agree that there are likely ways to do the things that government does more efficiently, and that includes more efficiently financially. But as you look at this as someone who knows intimately how things work, is it your sense that there is a rhyme and a reason to the way these proposed cuts are coming about?
So I have two answers to that. So I talk and work with a lot of state and local emergency managers. Their basic worry right now isn't so much a number. It's just they don't know. They don't know what the plan is. And you don't want to go into hurricane season or, a 365-day fire season without knowing what's the division of labor. And so what Trump's administration has done is said, well, we want everything to change, but they haven't put anything new in its place. And that kind of ambiguity is challenging. The second is just this idea of efficiency coming from DOGE. Of course, we want to be more efficient. We want to end fraud. It's a difficult way to judge preparedness, right? You think about it like I often say you're going to miss it when it's gone, right? You don't know you want an early alert system for floods until you really want it because children are dying. And that's one of the challenges of judging preparedness as a nation for the kinds of harms we're going to get is you don't really need them until you actually really need them. And I have to say, I think that's why Donald Trump switched 180 degrees on whether FEMA was going to still exist. He thinks I can get rid of it. No one cares. And then all of a sudden, you've got a lot of people dead and people realize, wow, this is a government function that we really, really want. And I hope that they continue to learn the lesson of what emergency management and Homeland Security is. It's about getting ready, and that you don't know you need until you actually really need it. And we have hurricanes and terrorism and cyber attacks and viruses, all the things that we want in place to protect ourselves from the harms ahead.
Someone once made the analogy to me that, and this can be applied to a number of things, it's likened it to a fire department. So there are plenty of hours in a day where you may have a number of firefighters sitting around waiting for something to happen. And people may look at that and say, why are we paying so many people to sit there and be ready? Yeah. But then when the moment happens, which you can't always predict, those are all the people who you need to be ready in the moment.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's what it means. What preparedness means is you can't judge it until you actually need it. So I think a lot, like one of the entities that was cut from the FAA wasn't air traffic controllers, because the Trump administration said, no, we're keeping the air traffic controllers. But there was a group of people around the air traffic controllers who exist for the sole function of diverting airplanes if there's space or if there's air debris. So you don't think, oh, well, they're just sitting around. Like, how hard could that be? And then in the middle of this, one of Elon Musk's rockets blows up, and you have to divert hundreds of commercial flights to avoid the debris. So it's just that kind of thing that you're sort of thinking, well, why do we need those people sitting around? Well, you need them for that moment when you're protecting hundreds of thousands of people in the sky. And that's how we have to think about what FEMA actually does in terms of preparing the nation as a whole, and thinking about what burdens are we putting on state and locals through this whole new regime that no one quite knows what it looks like yet, and are they ready for it? And the answer, at least on the last one, is they don't even know. They don't know what FEMA is. They don't even know what's going to exist as we head into hurricane season.
And so in terms of that uncertainty that state and local officials are feeling, right? They don't know what's going to be available to them. They don't know how things are going to change. When you are speaking with those state and local officials, how successful have they been in making their case, if you will, to federal officials, or at least, or even having that line of communication open?
Well, we will see. This is a new story. We'll see if whether there's push by particular localities. This is hitting urban cities. This reduction is hitting urban cities the most. I'm not the first to notice, as we've been reporting, that Donald Trump goes after cities in terms of funding and urban or blue cities. We're also starting to see potentially a distinction in terms of disaster relief between blue states that seek it and red states. This is partisanship that we've never seen in disaster management before. There's always been politics, but there's never been partisanship. So we have to see how this unfolds, but there's no question that they're adapting. FEMA is still in place. It's, I think, about 25% staff reduction now. We've got more harms coming in terms of flooding and heat, as we just were reporting, and of course, hurricane season, which is going to peak more later in the summer, and the will is there to protect the American public, I think, from everyone in emergency management on the operational level. It's just whether there's capacity. We can surmise at this stage that billions of dollars of loss and 20 to 25% FEMA staff reduction do not bode well.
Juliette, always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.